Now, since the last time we talked, there's been a lot of buyout activity going on, and my heart goes out to anybody on this call that had that got riffed, or before they were ready, right? And I've gotten a lot of those calls this week, and we could talk more about that next week. But last week, I promised you all we would talk about the life insurance, right? So we'll go through the life insurance stuff today because now that a lot of people are getting ready to retire, the life insurance questions has been coming up more and more and more. And this is something that we talk a lot about at Fed Legacy, but today I'm gonna go back again to the basics of the FEGLI, which stands for the Federal Employee Group Life Insurance, the good, the bad, and the ugly, right? Because with the FEGLI, there are some good things, right? And we'll go through that, and then you go through the other stuff that surprises you, and then the ways in which we've been helping clients navigate the FEGLI through the years, right? And it's kind of what we got started the company on, honestly. 17 years ago was just doing life insurance and making sure people understood that. So we'll go through that. And so when it comes to the FEGLI, there's things you just can't ignore, right? Because now what's happening, and before you could plan for your retirement. You could, all right, I'm gonna retire in 5 years. I'm gonna go and get my life insurance in order. I'm gonna go and get, my TSP in order. But nowadays, what's happening is people get, the surprise. You just never know how it's gonna be. And so what we want to do is we want to address those things early on, because you just don't have time to kind of plan as much as you used to, right? And so the one thing about the FEGLI is over time it creeps up in costs, and then when you retire, you either pay the exorbitant amount of costs you have to pay, or you just go from having $600,000 in coverage to headed toward only 25% of your last salary, right? So let's go through how that works. So with the FEGLI, again, it stands for the Federal Employee Group Life Insurance. When you sign up for FEGLI, you have the option to sign up for the basic. You also have the option to sign up for option A, which is $10,000 flat. Then you also have option B, which you can sign up to. You can go up to 5 times your salary, and then C is your family. And how option C works, it works in multiples, up to multiples of 5. And so you can, when it comes to your spouse, the multiple is 5,000. And so 5,000 times 1 times 2 times 3 times 4 times 5 is what you can get, right? And so 5 being the one that most people get. So if you have a spouse, you can do 5 multiples of 5,000, and that gives you 25,000. If you have children, the multiple is 2,500. The amount is 2,500, and then a multiple of 5. And so you can get up to 12,500 on your children, and they can keep that coverage until they turn 22. And so if you're a person who, or maybe a single parent, and you have kids and you have option C, and your kids are over 22 and you're still paying for it, you got to let OPM know that you no longer have anybody covered under that plan, because they'll still keep taking the money out until you let them know. So just be prudent about that. If you have kids that are coming up on that age of 22, just make sure you contact OPM and make sure they drop them. And if you don't know what to do, just reach out to us. Just shoot us a quick note. We have the form that you can form with the instructions, everything you need to do. My team can shoot you over that email. And it's a pre-formatted email, pre-written email, and it tells you exactly what to do, who to submit it to. So if you need that help, just reach out to our team. We'll make sure we get that to you. And again, that's and this only applies to people if they're divorced, or they're just single and they have kids and you have option C. You want to let them know, because your spouse, if you're married, your spouse is going to always be covered, right, until you retire, right? And if you can choose at that point if you want to keep it or not. But if you're not married and you have kids that are on the option C and they reach the age of 22, nobody's covered under that plan anymore, but you're still paying for it. So again, we'll help you with that if you need help, or just reach out to your HR and they should be able to help you get the right forms to OPM and take care of it for you. Then again, you have option B, goes up to 5 times your salary. We'll go over that. And just to talk about the basic real quick, the basic 1 time your salary, the cost is minimal though, $20, $20, $30 max for the basic. When you retire, what is free is a 75% reduction once you reach 62, right? And so that begins to drop down. What ends up happening is your basic begins to drop down to 25% of your salary. But while you're working, the cost is minimal. And most people don't pay no attention. And what we always tell people is to keep your basic, but then you want to make changes to your option B, because that's what costs you so much going into retirement. And so here's an example also of what happens to your FEGLI basic after retirement. And this is just an example. We have Carla here, 121,000 is her salary. Again, option 1, 75% reduction. at 121 salary, if you reduce it down to 75%, that's a coverage of 30,000. Now that's free, no cost after age 65, right? But option B, I mean not option B, but option two, she can also do 50% reduction, right? Again, this requires no medical or anything like that. You won't have the 121,000, but you will have the 60,000. That cost in this example is $45, right? So that cost isn't too much, but you get $60,000 in coverage instead of going down to the 30,000, which is free. But then if you do the no reduction, and this is the one that's the most costly, right? The no reduction is where you keep your 121, and this is just the basic. If you keep your 121,000 in retirement, in this example, you're looking at $272. $272. So the option three, no reduction, is pretty expensive when you compare it to a private policy. But the good thing about this is if you're a person that has health issues and things like that, and you can't get any outside coverage, it's not a bad option, right? Now, are there better options out there if you don't have any health issues? Yes. But if you do, then this is not a bad option to take because, again, you get solid coverage. You pay a little bit more than you would normally, but it's not so bad that that is blowing the budget in retirement, right? If life insurance is really important to you. So that's the options with the basic. Now, the one that gets talked about the most in retirement seminars is option B. And the reason why option B gets talked about a lot is because option B is the one option that goes up in cost every 5 years in a significant way. So let's look at this example for Carla. 121,000 again, 600 to 5,000, and you can run your actual numbers through the FEGLI calculator. If you go to OPM, if you just put a FEGLI calculator in Google, it'd be the first thing that comes up is an opm.gov calculator, and it's pretty simple. You just walk yourself through it, put your salary in, check the option that you have, option A, then B 5 times your salary if you have that, and it'll show you what your cost will be in the future. So, but in this example, you got a person she's 58 years old, 605 in coverage. 605 in coverage because she has option B 5 times, and then her cost at that point is $121 a pay period. So in that 5-year window, she's paying around $15,730 for that coverage in that time, right? And 55 is when you really start to see the cost start to really hit home, and it starts to go really above the average cost of life insurance or something that's equivalent, right? And then what ends up happening at 60, the cost more than doubles, right? Now she goes from paying 121 to 266 a pay, right? And now 15,000 over a 5-year period. She's now paying 34,000 over a 5-year period, right? And so that jump from 50 to 55 is a jump for sure, right? But at that point, you can kind of find coverage from 50 to 55. You can kind of find, you're right, you're pretty much on par as far as what you should be paying for life insurance. At 55, you go slightly above what you should be paying for life insurance. At 60, is not even a comparison anymore. You can get way better coverage almost for half the price, right? And so, you have to know these things because the younger you are, the easier it is to get coverage, number one, and the longer you're able to save money when it comes to the difference, right? And so this is one of the things we always talk about at Fed Legacy. It's just a low-hanging fruit, something that, anybody on this call who doesn't have any major health issues but wants to make sure they have life insurance, it just makes sense to get a supplemental policy before you reach the age of 55 and definitely 60, right? Because you'll save yourself a lot of money, and you can put that money that you would have spent into an investment that can grow. And that's what we're all about here at Fed Legacy, is making sure you retire on time and with confidence. And one of the key things when it comes to confidence is, especially like right now where people are scrambling to get their retirement in order, one of the things they're thinking, well, what about my life insurance? And then you have to go out and try to apply for life insurance and things like that. But if you already have your personal policy already set up, you're not having to respond to these increases in costs or being suddenly retired. Now your basic goes from $20 a pay period to now, if you want to keep it, to $270 a month, right? You when you're retiring, you don't want to be having to make those last second decisions. A lot of stress. You want to get this stuff taken care of ahead of time. And that's why, I wanted to talk about life insurance tonight, because that jump from 55 to 59 to 60 is a big one. And so that's the truth for a lot of people on this call who are in retirement age. So you want to make sure that life insurance stuff is taken care of. And then when you're in your 50s, I mean, the chances are your health is better than what it will be in your 60s, right? Not only that, but the cost of, life insurance is cheaper because you're younger. So the cheaper you get life insurance, the better. And so what I wanted to do is just show a cost comparison here, right? So what we do with Fed Legacy when we're going through our TSP finish line process, one of the questions we always ask is, how much life insurance do you personally own? And the reason why we ask it that way is because a lot of times when people are going through our process, they proudly say, I got the FEGLI, but the personally owned piece is key, because with the FEGLI, when you retire, the costs are not fixed. The costs continue to go up, because it's subject to you working in the government, right? When you don't work in the government anymore, the costs go up on the basic, and then the option B, like I mentioned, continues to go up in cost. So personally owned means you have a policy. The fixed is a fixed rate. You know what's going on with it. Nothing's going to change. It is what it is, and then you can plan around it in a way that's a lot easier. So here's the difference, right? So we got an option B policy that's total coverage, but including the basic 605. In this example, what we always tell people is we want you to keep the basic. So if you see this private policy here, it says 500,000, because we prefer you to keep the basic, because while you're working, the basic doesn't cost you that much. And even with that 75% reduction, 30,000 in life insurance in this example, or whatever your salary is, for free isn't a bad deal. So we always say keep that basic when you retire due to 75% reduction. So if you look here, and this person could be in that 55 to 59 range, the biweekly they're paying for FEGLI is around 121. The private policy is at 90, but it's flat though for 20 years, right? And so that's a big difference, because you can plan around something that's flat rather than something that's going to keep going up. And so then again, as we just talked about, at 60, the cost goes up, right? And so then now you're looking at $1,200 a month, and the cost continues to go up, and that's in that 70, 74 range. And so you look at that total 20-year cost on the FEGLI option B from 55 to 70, you're looking at 168,000 in premium spent, right? Whereas with the private policy, you're looking at 46,000, because the cost is a fixed cost, is much lower. And one of the things we always talk about is, what return are you getting on your money, right? So you want your money working for you. And so that extra money that you could be spending, you want to make sure you're putting that to something that can grow, whether that's paying down debt, that's freeing you up in retirement to invest more, right? Or you put the money into your TSP and that's growing, right? You always want to be the money working for you, not working against you. And so the FEGLI just works against you because you just don't have control over it. And so another thing with the FEGLI is there's no living benefit, no long-term care type coverage attached to it. Whereas with the private policy, at least the ones we offer, have those type of riders on them, which is a big deal, right? So we had a client recently, and this happens all the time. We get calls like this. She had a heart attack recently, a couple months ago, and she needed to. We were just talking, and she was talking about how she wanted to. She just wanted to. One of her kids was taking care of her and things like that. And I mentioned, like, if you wanted to pay for some nurse care, or just even pay for your daughter to continue to support you like she is, and it not affect her and her family. You have the living benefit rider where you could take money off of your policy because of your illness. And she was able to take money off of her policy. Her policy was $300,000. She was able to take $100,000 off of it, and pay for different care, help her daughter a little bit because she was taking care of her and things like that. Like, you don't have to die with the policy. And a lot of private policies nowadays have those type of riders on them. And you want to take advantage of them because it helps you a lot when it comes to, again, peace of mind, not having to go into your TSP for medical needs and things like that, or being a first layer of defense, I should say, before you have to go into your TSP. And again, like I said, you have control over the policy, right? And so one of the things that we talk about on all these calls at Fed Legacy, we truly believe in making sure you retire with confidence, right? On time with confidence. And one thing we talk about here is just replace and redirect. And by replace is just like replace option B and redirect it into the strategy that we always talk about here, which is your financial house, which is creating a foundation of protected money, having a tax and income strategy, inflation strategy, and then making sure your money is growing at the right pace, right? And having a percentage of money is growing at the right pace. If you stick to that formula when it comes to retirement, you won't flinch, because all your ducks are in a row. Even our clients now who are getting ripped in their 50s, when we have our sit downs, we're talking to them about it. Most of them are okay because we set these strategies in place years ago. And so we already know what the income is going to come from, the extra income. Most of the debts we've already talked about and addressed some of that. We already have a tax strategy in place, and we've been growing the money at a good pace because we are the percentages of how we do things. And so you want to make sure that when you're going into retirement, you have a strategy that can win no matter the political climate, no matter the financial climate, because when you have that in place, it makes a big difference. And for you as federal employees, I always say this: you're not like your neighbors, your cousins, your family members, because as federal employees, you have a pension. Most people don't have pensions and a TSP and a Social Security. A lot of people that have pensions don't have Social Security. As FERS, and I'm assuming most people on this call are FERS employees, you have both, and that's a big deal. So when it comes to that, most people we sit with, their FERS pension plus their Social Security covers their bills for the most part, a large portion of it. And so the way in which you invest your TSP is not like your neighbors who, because they have to live off their TSP for the rest of their life, because all they have is their 401k and their Social Security, which isn't much for some people, right? You have that extra pension, and that makes a big difference. So the strategy you have is very different. The tax implications on your TSP, is very different than somebody who's a private practice, private industry, and theirs on their 401k, right? So you want to make sure you have a strategy that's for you. And that's what we talk about here at Fed Legacy when we talk about the financial house, because we primarily focus with federal employees and been doing it for quite a while, right? And so with that in mind, you just want to make sure you replace and redirect. It makes it a win-win for you, because now you have life insurance that's going to last you a lot longer at a cost that's fixed, and you can budget for it. And the added benefit of, if I have a medical emergency, while my TSP is growing, I could take the money from my TSP to support myself, right? And so in this example, we of course we run these numbers for you when you meet with us. This person saved about $6,000 over that per year average over that 20-year period, just by having a private policy, right? And so I can't tell you how many people we meet who are retired and still have option B because they just don't know how, they can't get covered. They don't think they can get coverage. They don't think they can get coverage anymore because they think they're older. If you rectify this early on, redirect that money into your TSP, and let that money grow and work for you, you'll have a solid retirement. So again, if you ever want to book a call with us, just go to fedlegacycall.com, or in the chat, just put that you want to meet with us. And then just, my team looks at this chat and we'll reach out to you tomorrow or so and get a session started. Just say, I want to meet with someone, put it in the chat, and we'll make sure we get that set up.